have to say something. We can't just start talking.
Well, that's what we've done in the past.
Well, no. All right, so when you're ready, I'll do it.
Okay. Hello, and welcome to the School Safety Free Period. I'm Amanda Klinger.
And I'm Dr. Amy Klinger, and this is our podcast in which we talk about lots of absurd, ridiculous, unbelievable, holy smoke, did that really happen sort of incidents that happen in schools. And if you're listening to this as an educator, you probably have a whole bunch of them too. But we're going to, in this series of the free period, we're going to take our free period to talk a little bit about an incident and then sort of react and talk about it from an expert opinion and unpack it and see what all the different parts of it are, and then maybe argue a bit or go back and forth a bit about how we feel about that, and then hopefully come up with some takeaways for what we do with the information that we glean from this little event. Now, the first few ones, I've been the one that was bringing the unbelievable event to you, and you reacted, and now today you're reciprocating and returning the favor.
Yes, so I have a story, and all of the things...
But they're all true.
Yeah, all the things that we covered
So it's
are
not a
always
story.
True. Well, so I have an incident to talk about, and the first 3 episodes were very clearly safety-based, and mine is a little bit more tangentially related to safety.
Tangentially?
Yes, and it is
more... That's a $5 word that means kind of related.
Yeah, I suppose. And mine is a little bit more of a school law issue. But there is a safety...
So this is just to reinforce the idea that I'm not a lawyer? Is that what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I really just want to confuse you with some stuff, talking about stuff. So my case comes to us from the state of Georgia, and it comes to us from a lawsuit that is happening. So There's a number of high school students in Georgia who are bringing a lawsuit against the sheriff of their county and a number of deputies of the county because in April of this year, the sheriff and over a dozen deputies came to the school because...
So they're all from the same school?
Yes.
Okay.
The
kids.
Yes.
Yes.
The
plaintiffs. To use the legal term.
Oh, yeah.
The plaintiffs are all from the same school.
Yes. So the deputies came to school looking for illicit, illegal drugs. And
because they wanted some, or because they had an understanding that there were some there?
Supposedly they had some sort of a suspicion, and we'll sort of get into that, of how reasonable the suspicion was.
So they're thinking there's drugs there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what's interesting is the account of the student. The students say that the deputies were looking for like 13 specific kids supposedly had drugs, but they proceeded...
It's a high school, right?
Mm-hmm, proceeded to search nearly every student for drugs. They alleged that the deputies used pat-down searches, with some deputies
How big is this school?
Not big. It's not in Atlanta. It's not in Atlanta or anything. It's in an outlying county.
So they just didn't want anyone to feel left out?
I suppose.
Like it's participation, like a participation trophy. If one of us gets searched, we're all going to get searched, so like no one feels left out.
Well, it wasn't like a Spartacus.
Being inclusive.
It wasn't like a Spartacus situation, like I'm the one with drugs. I'm the one with drugs. No, this was sort of against the will of the kids. But the lawsuit alleges that they used a pat-down search, and some deputies touched female students' breast and male students' genitalia.
That's where the drugs are.
Well, I'm going to have to cut that. Okay. The lawyer for the school district corroborates the students' accounts, saying that the students' complaint very accurately described what happened. Now, the district doesn't join the lawsuit.
So wait, how many law enforcement officers are we talking about?
Over a dozen.
Simultaneously?
Deputies.
So like this horde of like law enforcement, like a posse.
Yeah, like a whole bunch of them.
Comes in and searches everyone in the school.
Nearly every student, yes.
Who didn't get searched?
I don't think they can say
kids in the bathroom didn't get to.
Yeah. Well, it took over 4 hours. They were went into lockdown. They took the phones of the kids and parents who got wind of what was happening weren't allowed to see or speak to their kids. In the aftermath of the search, the sheriff told the local media that the pat-downs were legal because school administrators were present, which is like, apparently, if a teacher's there, you can just do whatever you want to a kid. No, not true, not accurate. The reason that they did it is because several weeks earlier, the city police had done a drug search and nothing came up, and the sheriff felt that it wasn't thorough enough. And
The city police had done a search
search of
of the
drugs.
same school, though.
same school of some specific kids, and they turned up no drugs.
The sheriff's
And
office.
the sheriff said, that wasn't good enough. I'm going to go grope them
so
until
the
drugs fall
sheriff's-
out.
The sheriff's office
Yes.
overrode the.
Yes.
So did the city police come and help?
No,
Were-
not
so,
the second time.
So the 12 officers, the posse
deputies
was
were
all
all
just
sheriff
sheriffs.
deputies.
Okay. Wonder how enthused they were. I mean, they must have been like, "Are you kidding me?"
Well, they were, I would say, over-enthused based on the
You don't
allegations
know.
in this
You
complaint.
don't. Well, you don't know that.
I'm sorry. If
But
my
I doubt all
boss-
12 of them were chomping at the bit, like, "Yeah, we get to go and search kids."
Well, no, but some of
But
them
on the other hand, it seems
obviously
like they
were
got a little
eager.
overzealous
Yeah.
about it. And this are eager, maybe overzealous,
Overzealous, certainly. Something.
maybe they all have large hands.
Neither search turned up any illicit drugs. In the
That's a shame.
days after the search, the office of the sheriff acknowledged in a news release that at least one deputy had touched students in an inappropriate manner. They determined that it was that after the pat-downs were conducted, that one of the deputies had exceeded the instructions given by the sheriff, and they conducted a pat-down that was more intrusive. And they've taken corrective actions so that this behavior will not occur again.
Which behavior? The groping or like mass searching of all kinds of kids without any probable cause?
They're specifically the groping was what they were taking.
So they'll tone down the groping, but we might still search everyone whenever we feel like it.
So,
okay.
One of the plaintiffs, who's identified only by initial because they are a minor, said in an interview with the Washington Post that when deputies arrived to his 10th grade class, they marched students out into the hall, lined them up, girls on one side, boys on the other. Deputies made everyone put their palms on the wall, spread their legs, and take their shoes off. He said that during his search, the deputy put his hand on his back, put the deputy's hands in the back pockets of the student, and then underneath the shirt of the student, and then rubbed down both of the student's legs from thighs to his ankles, back up between them, and then, quote, he came up under my privates and then he grabbed my testicles twice. He said, I wanted to turn around and tell him to stop touching me. I wanted it to be over, and I just wanted to call my dad because I knew something wasn't right.
Well, so let me ask you a couple questions. Are the school administrators bound and gagged in the office during this?
Right, so that's what I think is very interesting.
Shot with a tranquilizer gun? I mean, where are the administrators during this time?
So I don't have any information about that. But what I do have is the sheriff says that this was okay because the administrators were present. So that's the sheriff's rationale for why this is okay.
Well,
but when you talk to the attorney for the school district is not refuting any of the claims of the student.
well, yeah, because who are they going to go after? The sheriff's department or the school?
They're going after the sheriff's department, and the school has tried to join the lawsuit against the sheriff's department and can't because they don't have standing because the school wasn't harmed in the civil rights of the school weren't harmed.
Well, I was going to say we could argue that the school was harmed, maybe not in
Legally,
a way that
not
you
in
can.
a legal sense.
Yeah.
I have just a couple other quick facts to add before we get too far sidetracked talking about it. In the complaint, and again, this is the allegations in the complaint of the lawsuit. So, it is true in the sense that this truly has been reported, and this truly is what's being alleged in a lawsuit. But it is important to keep that in mind, that they are just allegations. They're not findings of fact. The allegation says that they stuck their hands in the students' bras and underwear. The complaint includes allegation that some deputies cupped the genitals of the boys and exposed the breasts of some of the girls to their classmates. Sometimes the deputies wore gloves, other times they didn't.
Okay, but so now we're going to pick up a lot of healthy steam of outrage here, and I can understand that. But the rational part of me has to sort of say,
There's more to this.
come on. Is that, I mean, what are the chances that you have a county with like a dozen sex fiend deputies all, can't wait to get in there, just raging to get in there to start inappropriately touching kids? I mean, that seems to be like beyond what would be believable. So, I mean, as much as we would like to be righteously indignant, the skeptical part of me, which is the school administrator part of me, which always says there are no, not typically always clear cut, the victim is white as the driven snow and the other person is just the awful, devil incarnate. So I'm trying to be
there's
a little more even handed.
there's two separate legal issues here. There's the above and beyond inappropriate touching
I was going to say,
of children.
let's take that and put that on the shelf for a minute.
Which is the reason that it's a lawsuit that you're reading about in the Washington Post. The other issue that is not as shocking or, scandalizing, but is equally problematic is, how are you searching even if you have reasonable suspicion of 13 kids,
which we don't really,
which hasn't been proven,
doesn't appear to be very clearly established.
Right, but even if you do have reasonable suspicion of 13 students, why are you searching almost every student in a high school?
I was going to say, that's why I said put the outrageous searching procedures or methodology aside for a minute. Under what condition does anyone think it's appropriate to search literally every kid? Well, maybe not literally, but almost every kid in a given school. I don't care if it's a one-room schoolhouse with 30 kids and you only search half of them. I mean, what is the point of searching all of these kids? I mean, and we have to question, what was the standing of the administrator that you allowed that to happen? Were they allowed? Were they I would assume that they were sufficiently cowed by the show of force, and that maybe they didn't necessarily understand how intrusive the searches were going to be.
The lawyer for the school district said that the school knew that they were planning a search that day, but the school supposedly did not know that it would involve pat-downs and did not know that it would involve nearly every student.
And I would have to assume that that's correct, because no administrator in their right mind is going to go, oh yeah,
sure,
come in, have at it, every kid, get them all. I mean, that's not going to happen. But my question is, and it's not a question, it's more what I'm putting out there for us to reflect on, is there a point where, as an administrator, I have to advocate I have to advocate for my kids at peril of my own self professionally to stand up to this particular show of force? But it really does also sort of illustrate what we talk about a lot, which is this law enforcement orientation to all these issues, and that when you put educators
and
when you put educators and law enforcement people in a room to have a conversation about safety, as soon as the law enforcement guys start talking, the school guys stop talking. And that's not a knock on law enforcement. It's just, I think, somewhat the culture of schools and the culture of law enforcement is, if we're going to talk about safety, we're going to talk about searching, we're going to talk about drugs, we're going to talk about whatever, the law enforcement guy by default somehow is more right than the school guy. Right. And that's a problem.
Well, but I think also it's probably important to note that there is a legal standard for this. There are some gray areas and there are judgment calls to be made, but we have Supreme Court cases that show when it's reasonable to be searching students or not. You're allowed to, you can search as an administrator, you can search a student if you have reasonable suspicion of something like this.
And the interesting thing is, your standard as the school administrator, my standard for searching is not as high as for a law enforcement guy. And so these guys are coming in searching under conditions that would be questionable for an administrator to search under, let alone for...
Right. So, the courts have found, that, you can't just drug test every student. Drug testing has to be specifically tied to an extracurricular activity. We can't just blanket drug test all students. We can't just blanket, pat down all students. The degree of intrusion in of a search has to match the level of suspicion and the level of severity. And so there were specific cases where they're saying you can't strip search kids over this low level of degree of concern of drugs. And when they'd say that he had his hand underneath the shirt of a student, that's a strip search. If you're asking a kid to extend the waistband of their pants, that's a strip search. If you have them change from their clothes into gym clothes, that's a strip search. And so people, I think, when you say, you can't strip search for drugs, people think like, well, yeah, I can't have the kids standing there in their undergarments in the hall. No. What they did, aside from the potential groping, those things are considered a strip search.
Well, and not only that, it's dicey at best to ever engage in a strip search in a controlled environment with an administrator present and a law enforcement and other representation or whatever. But to put everybody out in the hallway like it's a tornado drill, and instead we're going to strip search everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't make it somehow better that we're all going to be equally violated, or we're all going to be equally offended, or we're all going to be equally under suspicion.
Right.
That doesn't make it more right.
Well, and what's troubling is, when I teach school law to pre-service administrators, and, the recommendations that I give, we talk about all the cases, and the recommendation that I give is if it's tough and it's a tough judgment call of you as an administrator searching a student, I would encourage you to get law enforcement involved, because if you are making a tough judgment call of should I force this kid to turn their pockets inside out, it should be for a real reason. It's not because I think you swiped a test off the desk and so you should involve law enforcement. So what's tough in this situation is law enforcement is the one that was making a completely wrong judgment call, and so that's kind of tough because those are the people that you suspect should know more.
And my other question would be, what drugs could be present in a school that could even remotely justify that level of response? I mean, and if you're looking for drugs in people's testicles and in their bras, clearly we're not talking about trafficking of, millions of pounds of drugs or something. You're talking about my little of drugs that's in my bra or that's wherever, if that's where we're looking.
Well, yeah.
So then how do you justify that tiny amount of whatever it is you're looking for is worth groping or looking in the bra of every single kid in this building on the off chance I find a Ziploc bag of, and again, I'm not advocating that we should have drugs in school. I'm not advocating that law enforcement is, I'm not knocking law enforcement, but just like we call out educators who are on the wrong side of an issue, mm-hmm. we have to equally be willing to call out other professions and other folks involved in schools who are on the wrong side of an issue. And I kind of feel like this might be one of them.
Well, and, there is, when you talk about in the severity and the intrusiveness of a search has to match the degree of concern. If I'm concerned that a kid is concealing a handgun in their pants, and I have a reasonable suspicion that they're concealing a handgun in their pants, all of a sudden asking them to lift up their shirt so I can see their waistband becomes a much more reasonable search. Whereas I'm concerned that you've
Yeah, what was the harm that we're worried about?
Right,
there was no one going to get shot or stabbed or molested. Well, I guess there was someone going to get molested. No one was going to get shot or stabbed, or this wasn't a life or death weapon sort of search.
Right, so they have this sort of amorphous, undefined suspicion of 13 kids that might have drugs. That's different than we had a kid OD and there's heroin in this building. We had a kid overdose. I mean, those are two very different.
But there is nothing that indicates that happened.
No,
and who are the plaintiffs? The 13 kids that were suspected to begin with?
No.
So these were just kids that got caught in this real wide net that was cast.
Yes, the plaintiffs are the students who are most upset about me being groped.
So we don't have any knowledge of if the 12 or 13 kids
no drugs were
actually were involved.
I mean, if there were drugs in that building, I feel like they would have found them. I mean, the one thing that search was very thorough.
Maybe it was the 2 or 3 kids that were in the bathroom and never.
Yeah.
I got a story about hiding drugs in the bathroom. Not that I did that, but I mean, kids don't necessarily always carry it around on their person when they have things in school.
Okay, but if I truly had probable cause or reasonable suspicion of drugs, then that would be an articulable suspicion, which mean I would have a clue where it was.
Did they look in lockers, backpacks? Did they have a drug dog?
Nothing
Do you
alleged.
know that, or it's just not?
It's not in the complaint.
So if we're gonna-
but they are saying, but the attorney for the school district does say that they don't know what the probable cause was. They don't know what the reasonable suspicion was.
And maybe that's something we need to, as a disclaimer. Maybe there was, maybe law enforcement had knowledge of some much more significant issue, something much more awful, terrible, ridiculous than what the school knew or what we're able to ascertain.
But the sheriff and the sheriff's department has made multiple public statements explaining and defending their conduct. I feel like if they had a better defense, they would have made it publicly when they said their other things.
Well, and I think the other thing, I guess we have to deal a little bit with the groping sort of thing. Maybe we don't. Maybe that's not worth even going there. But
I don't know how you can argue the other side of that one.
no, I'm not arguing the other side. I'm just saying, maybe when you search, if you're not very good at searching people, you inadvertently,
Expose their breasts to their classmates?
maybe it was a flimsy shirt, like an Old Navy shirt, popped open, but I don't think so.
Victim blaming.
No, I'm not victim blaming. What I was actually trying to get to was the idea that you could assume that if one or two kids felt like, oh, he was reaching really high up, on my thigh, or he was, because when you read the statement from the student, part of it sounds like what you would assume a search would be, running your hand down their thigh and so on. So you could try to defend the idea of maybe, someone that wasn't very experienced or was doing it quickly, or a kid was wiggling around, or I don't know. You could maybe if you squint,
It's a Pillsbury Doughboy.
if you squint and whistle past the graveyard, you could maybe say that one or two kids might have found it to be a little bit different. But clearly you've got a lot of plaintiffs, you've got a lot of apologies, you've got a lot of really graphic descriptions and specific information that makes it kind of hard to file this one under oops, accident sort of a thing. It does make it a little tough.
And the groping, inappropriate touching, oops, accident, they shouldn't have been in a position to be doing that anyway. They shouldn't have been doing a search on.
So the larger non-legal issue, not the larger, but the subsequent issue, the takeaway sort of thing is, okay, so what do you do with this now? So, we have to go back and we have to have school, and we are still concerned about drugs, and we still want to have a relationship with law enforcement. We want our students to respect the rights and the job that law enforcement is trying to do. We can't just chalk it up and go, yep, here's another example. So, the school is really caught. They're caught in a difficult situation trying to move forward from here. That's going to take a lot of.
But the problem is that it has a chilling effect, right? Sure. So now, say in 6 months, they come back to school and they do really have a reasonable suspicion that a kid has a knife in school. What administrator in that district or in any neighboring district is going to be willing to do a reasonable search on a kid?
Or you have a cop that shows up and has a reasonable suspicion, and you're going to stonewall him because you assume that he's coming back to grope more kids. So there's a ripple effect here that I think is the takeaway more so than any instruction that I could give. It's more like, boy, that happened, and I believe someone's going to pay for what happened in some fashion. But really the bigger question is moving forward. How do you salvage something from this for the school and for the kids and that law enforcement relationship with the kids and with the school? How do you salvage that? That's going to take some hardcore collaboration and really crafting some solution. You can't just act like it didn't happen and hope that you never have to search a kid again.
Yeah.
So not all of them have a happy ending.
I don't think any of them have had a happy ending. I don't think it's that type of a podcast.
Well, this is not as it certainly meets the bar of shocking. Yeah. Not quite as amusing maybe as some of our other ones, but it's always that sort of recovery phase that I think is sometimes the part we don't ever get to. So So it was good that we at least got to talk about that part of it too.
Well, so there you go. So thanks again for joining us for another episode of the School Safety Free Period. Please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We really appreciate that. And make sure you send this on to your friends, your education colleagues who also want to listen to a professional development podcast that won't put them to sleep. And if you have a shocking... what do you always say? Shock, dismay.
You have to sort through your file. Sort through your mental file of shocking, ridiculous, absurd things. And let us know what you want us to talk about.
Yeah, and send us articles and let us know. And if you have any questions or something else you'd like us to discuss, shoot us an email. The email is info@eschoolsafety.org, and we always love to hear from you. Thanks. Bye.